One of the most powerful tools in the entire Java programming languages is JUnit test cases, and in today's video we're going to be going over its many different applications. So imagine you have this scenario. You have a public method that adds two integers together. Well, how would you actually know that this works, and how would you go about testing it? Because simply printing out the statement would not be effective. Well, the solution to this is to actually make a JUnit test case, where you set up two private fields, x and y, and then you check to see if the result is what you expect. So in this example, you expect 5 to be the result, and the actual result is the method called to add with the parameters of 2 and 3. Well, let's get into JUnit test case. To be specific, JUnit test casing is a framework for unit testing, and it basically is made up of writing tests for small units of code. Typically, you're going to be writing test methods for multiple different methods. At the start of a JUnit test case, you always need to make sure that you have a setup method, which then is called before every other different test method. And finally, you want to make sure that you use assert statements to check the correctness of every different method call. Now, here are some of the most common assertions that you're going to be making. There's 6 of them. There's assert equals, which will take a parameter of expected. So in the case of our add method, it was 5. And then the actual call to the method that you're checking. Assert not equals works the same way. Assert true works very similar to assert equals, as it's basically expecting the method to return true, and then assert null works as if you are asserting that it is equal to null. Now, when it comes to testing every condition, it's very important that you test every different condition that an if-else statement could make. So, for example, if you have n simple conditions, then you need to test n plus 1 times. This is true for an if-else statement, and all the different branches must be called. Looking at an example here, if you have this if statement of x is equal to 0 and y is equal to 1, that means you have 2 conditions in the if statement. However, you need to do 3 checks here: true and false, false and true, and true and true. Because the only time this if statement would be true is if both conditions are true. If you're looking at an or statement, like the second example, then you need to make 3 checks where x is true and y is false, x is false and y is true, and both of them are false, which results in the entire condition being false. Now, the ultimate goal when you're making a JUnit test case is to break the code. You don't want to write bad test cases, which basically makes it seem like your code is working perfectly fine, and then later down the line you find a ton of bugs in the system. So you need to be thinking of all your different edge cases. Some of these might be a null object being passed into your method, 0 being passed into your method, or if you're working with a data structure, you need to check, is the data structure empty, right? And there's a whole different list of edge cases that I could talk about. Now, when it comes to the typical structure of a JUnit test case, you want to have your private fields at the top so that their scope covers the entire test case. Next, you want to have a setup method that instantiates each field, and then finally the test methods. JUnit test casing might seem like a lot, but really it's not. There's only 3 different stages of the test case. Now let's hop into some coding right in Eclipse. In Eclipse now, for simplicity, say we have this student class. It takes a few different fields. It has a personal ID, which would be a name in this instance, the hometown, graduation year, and others. Now in this, we have our typical constructors, setters, getters, and then we have a few methods that we want to use here, which is calculating the next reunion, and then also an equals method and toString. Actually, creating a JUnit test case is very simple. All you do is come up to File, New, JUnit test case, and within this window, you can see multiple different options. For me, it says student test 3 because I already created 2 tests beforehand, but for you, it should say student test if you were working with the student class. Within the method stubs, typically you only want to be picking setup before each method, and then you can go ahead and generate comments, which will help keep everything organized. You click the next button, and these are all the different methods that you want to test. Which methods do you want to test in this test case? If you're testing the entire class, it's good practice to pick all the exact test methods that you want. So if I click finish here, you'll see that it comes with the setup method and all the different test methods that I would want to use. Now, I've already done this for simplicity, but I've set up a student test case, and in this student test case, there's only 3 structures, like I said before. There's the fields that you have at the top, the setup method that is run between each and every test method, and then an example of a test method. So in this case, we have Joe and Bob that are both students. Joe's name is Joe, Bob's name is Bob. That's pretty simple, right? So you would expect the test2string method to return the string representation of that object. If we head back to student and scroll down here, we can see what our toString method is really doing. All our toString method does is return the personal ID. Personal ID, we said before, is actually just the name of the student. So if we go to our student test case and actually run this Java file, then we'll see that our test case passed right here. But say we actually mess up our test case, right? So we put Joel here instead of Joe. This means that we are expecting Joel from this method call. And you'll see that our test method actually fails. It is expecting Joel and the actual is Joe. So that would cause the test method to fail. This would be an example of if your test cases were run wrongly and you put the wrong expected values. But what if the actual method was wrong, right? So if we go back here, we fix this method and we scroll down to student, right? What if we actually did hometown instead of personal ID? This means that it would return the hometown string representation rather than the name. So if we go back to our student test case, run this file, it's going to return that there was an error. In this case, we expected Joe, but the actual is null. Why is this? In this case, we never actually set the hometown for Joe. All we did was set his name. So if we go back to student, scroll down and fix this to what it was before, right? Personal ID, then it will pass again. So it's very important to know that when you are using JUnit test cases, there's two errors that you could possibly make. You could actually make something wrong with the expected value, or you can make something wrong with the actual method. So that is a very big distinction to make. Once you have your JUnit test case, you need to make sure that all your code is organized, which is done through Java documents. This is a type of style which makes sure all of your code is organized so that other people can read it. Watch this video here to learn all about JDocs and how it helps coders to purposefully show what they are doing in each of their lines of code. Thank you for watching.